Okay, this is lesson 108, reviewing adjective clauses. So what's the difference between a clause and a phrase? We've been working with phrases, and now we have clauses. Well, a clause has its own subject and verb, and a phrase doesn't. In the top sentence, the Mayflower that is growing in the woods is my favorite flower. That sentence contains a clause. The second sentence contains a phrase. The Mayflower growing in the woods is my favorite flower. In the top sentence, the clause is, that is growing in the woods. That is a clause. And in the second sentence, growing in the woods is a phrase. So for the clause, that is growing in the woods, it has a subject and a verb. Is the verb, and then who or what is. That is. So that is a subject, and is a verb. But in the phrase, growing in the woods, there's a verb form, growing, but we don't know who or what is growing, so there's no subject. So that's why it's a phrase. That's the difference between a clause and a phrase. Now, in English, we say things both ways. Both of these sentences would be easily something we would say in English, so that's fine. And in both cases, the clause and the phrase are both being used as adjectives because they're both answering the question, which flower, which Mayflower? The one that is growing in the woods. Or, in the second sentence, the one that's growing in the woods. So in the top one we have an adjective clause, in the bottom one we have an adjective phrase. So if I wanted to change the adjective clause to an adjective phrase, I would take away the relative, that, take away the relative, and take away be. And that's true for a lot of sentences. Okay, for using adjective clauses, our assignment today is to do exercise E. It says, the information that is placed in adjective clauses can often be stated in other ways. Rewrite the following sentences, changing the italicized adjective clauses into participial phrases or infinitive phrases. Put a comma after a modifying phrase at the beginning of a sentence. So the first one they changed to a participial phrase. Notice the ing. The policeman, who was entering the cafe, spotted the suspect. They took away the relative who, and they took away be, so they took away who was, and they're left with the phrase entering the cafe. Entering the cafe, comma, the policeman spotted the suspect. So since entering is the present participle form of the verb, entering the cafe is a participial adjective phrase. The second one, they changed it to an infinitive phrase. There are the dishes that must be washed. They took away the relative that and must be, and they changed it to the infinitive to be washed. So, there are the dishes to be washed. Notice how that must be washed is an adjective clause, and to be washed is an infinitive phrase. Both are adjectives because they both tell which dishes, the ones that must be washed. So in the clause, it has a subject and verb. That must. That's the subject and verb. But in the phrase, there's the verb to be washed, but there's no subject. So it's a phrase. But we would say it either of those ways in English. So, for sentence number 1, the trim that must be painted has already been scraped. We can change it to a participial phrase or an infinitive phrase. How about an infinitive phrase? What if we said, the trim to be painted has already been scraped? Number 2, the teams which were coming from the north were all snowbound. What if we changed which were coming from the north to the participial phrase coming from the north? Take away the relative which and take away be, which is were. The teams coming from the north were all snowbound. Number 3, yesterday I read 3 stories that were written by Rudyard Kipling. What if we changed it to, yesterday I read 3 stories written by Rudyard Kipling. This doesn't look like a participial phrase because there's no ing, but it's just the past participle form of write instead of the present participle writing. But we took away the relative that and we took away be, were.
New message from Betsy Partridge.
So yesterday I read 3 stories written by Rudyard Kipling. Number 4, the thing that you should do is to reenact the situation. What if we changed it to, the thing to do is to reenact the situation. Then we've changed the adjective clause, that you should do, to the adjective infinitive phrase, to do. Faith, who was hiding behind the door, overheard our plans for her birthday party. Well, if we take away the relative who and the form of be, then we're left with the participial phrase hiding behind the door. And we could say Faith, hiding behind the door, overheard our plans for her birthday party.